Hello and welcome to another episode of My Southern Exposure. I'm Joseph Manuel Alvelo, your host, and today is July 5th, 2020. Goodness gracious, what a week it's been. I'm still working on my home repairs, had a surprise birthday party for my partner, and unfortunately, our COVID numbers have shot through the roof for Florida in general and also all across the United States. So I might be shifting some stuff around as we're talking about things to get into more detail about COVID and some additional topics. We have another special guest lined up for later this afternoon. I should say this evening. I guess it's afternoon if you're out west, or this evening for us over here on the East Coast. If you want to contact me directly, you can. My email address is joseph@mysouthernexposure.site. That's once again, joseph@mysouthernexposure.site. And I once again want to welcome Rajee back to the show. How are you doing, honey?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm still here. I am still here. Welcome back, everyone. We got another show. This is show number 7, and 7 happens to be my lucky number, by the way. So I think this is going to be a good one, hopefully. So anyway, I stepped out on faith this week. I was invited to a certain person's birthday party that I attended. And then yesterday, for the 4th of July, I was invited to this a fabulous barbecue. Oh my God. When I tell you the music was great. They had plenty of drinks, all types of drinks. And the food was like to die for. Oh my God. It's a friend of mine, Gabe. He's a trans guy, by the way. And he actually has a business on Instagram. Well, it's on a lot of different social media platforms. But what he came up with for trans guys is a underwear with a built-in bulge, and it's been pretty successful. So anyway, he had the party and his mom threw it, and I was like, "Girl, you know how to season some food," because it was just delicious. So we tried to be as safe as possible. I mean, it's one of those things like we've just been social distancing for so long, and it's like you want to be careful because supposedly it's spiking. But at the same time, I think you have to step out on faith to just hope for the best. So we tried to be as safe as possible, and we had a good time. So hopefully we'll be okay. I won't be coughing during the show. What do you think about that, Mick? And I think
Hi guys.
Mick is on mute.
Yeah, I always put myself on mute just to make sure that I'm not talking when anyone else is talking. But it's good to see everyone. I hope if everyone did go out this weekend, you at least wore masks and you were distancing safely. So, Rajee, it sounds like you tried to do your best. So I hope you guys were safe, and I hope that you guys did well, because people keep saying that the second wave of COVID is coming, but the second wave is here. The numbers are higher now than they've been before, and the government's not doing anything for you because they don't know what they're doing. So really the best thing to do is to stay at home. Don't go to parties. Don't share food. Don't go anywhere without a mask, and just don't really go out at all, because that's how people are getting sick, and that's how people are going to get ill. Because I know that for a fact, my sister, she's a service worker, and she just started going back to work about a few weeks ago, and she has tested positive for COVID. She's okay, and she is thankfully, her symptoms are very mild, and she's been good about social distancing. However, because of the nature of her job, she had to go back because, her benefits were going to run out because Ohio opened everything again. And what happened, lo and behold, she caught COVID. So no matter how safe you're being and how much you're doing, you really probably shouldn't be going out and going to parties with friends. I understand that some social distancing things can allow some events to be okay and some open air things to be okay, but really for the most part, this is just something that I think people need to be patient with, and that we need to accept as a new normalcy. I know it sucks to not have to see anybody, and it sucks to not be able to go out and enjoy the summer. But if that's what it means to save a bunch of people's lives and to make sure that there is not a full collapse in this country just from the stress on our healthcare systems and the stress on our workforces, and just that a bunch of people don't die, we need to stay home. But that is my update for the week, because that is sort of what should have consumed everybody's week. But I'm going to throw it back to Joseph.
Thank you so much, Mick, and I greatly appreciate your perspective, and I agree with you completely. I am going to briefly talk about what the show is going to be about, then also readdress some of what you brought up, Mick, and also Rajee, with the COVID, because the COVID is really the main thing that's happening right now to everybody. We cannot avoid it, and the numbers are going in the direction that I originally projected and warned people about before. So, but weather. I've done some research on weather, I should say a lot of research on weather, and I believe Mick might know a little bit about earthquakes out in the West, and I believe Rajee will have some interesting perspectives on all of what I have to say as well. So my thing to address with Mick and both Rajee is we did a really good job. It was a very small, quote unquote, party, 6 people. So it wasn't like we had 20. So there was plenty of space. So we definitely did a good thing. And in reference to that regard, I wear a face mask, I have gloves, I have a face shield, wash everything down whenever I go anywhere and everything. And we'll go over some of those numbers a little bit later during the show. But I'm curious to see what Rajee has to say about the weather in general and natural phenomena, because everyone has different definitions for weather and natural phenomena. So I'm really curious to see what you have to say, Rajee.
Oh, really? I always have a lot to say. So, in regards to the party, it was so funny. At yours and even the barbecue yesterday, I just want to say this. I found a corner and I planted myself in that seat and I stayed there pretty much, and that was my zone, my area. So anyway, it was so funny, and I was there for like a long time, and I'm like in this one area, but hey, still had a good time. So as far as the weather's concerned, what I will say about weather is that weather to me is a reminder that we human beings are really not in control, in the sense of like when these things happen, especially like hurricanes and earthquakes and tornadoes and stuff, and especially like the tornadoes, they come and you hardly have any warning, like only a couple of minutes. So it's a reminder that as human beings we can plan, we can plan things, we can we have all this technology and we try to be as safe as possible. But honey, Mother Nature is nothing to play with, and she will remind you that she's the one in control. One particular incident that really brought that home for me was in 2004. It was, I think, December 24th or 25th, the big tsunami that killed like those hundreds of thousands of people. And actually, it was 2 days before my dad had passed away. So I remember, that just really sticks out in my head. And it was like, I think about all those lives, and people were just living their lives, and then boom, this big wave tsunami comes and they're gone. So that's like what comes to my head initially. That's like the main thing that I think about when we're talking about weather. It's just one of those things. And I'll talk more about it, but I want to throw it to Nikki, and I want to Mickey, and I want to throw it to Mickey like a tornado.
I caught it, and so now I have the tornado, so now I'm able to speak. But I think Joseph made an interesting point. I could talk about earthquakes being out here in California, even though it's not technically a weather phenomenon, but he's right in saying like it is a natural disaster that we deal with out here, and it's one of those things that you kind of just have on the back of your mind, that it always could happen. But I think what's more pressing right now is we're finally getting into a time of the year where the weather gets really hot. The weather is going to be in the high 80s this week, and we're in a desert. And on top of being in a desert, when you're in an urban environment, you're surrounded with concrete, you're surrounded with massive buildings that don't really cool anything off. If anything, they make stuff hotter. And on top of that, Los Angeles has a really, really, really high homeless population. And so you have to think about homeless people having to deal with the simplicity of the elements being either too hot or even too cold. There's an interesting article when I was doing research before this, and I learned that in recent years, Los Angeles has had more cases of deadly hypothermia than places like New York or other Midwest or northern cities, just because obviously during the day out here, it can get up to usually it's between like the mid to high 60s to like low 70s, maybe even more so depending on the time of year, but it's always warm. But in the evenings, if it's like a shorter day or it's earlier in the year, like in January, it can get very, very cold very quickly. Like it can be a 10-degree change from the afternoon going into the evening. And for hypothermia to set in, it can set in at 50 degrees, and it does get to be around 50 degrees at night here in California. And so a lot of homeless people end up dying of the cold on the street, which sounds very bizarre to hear out in California that that's a thing that happens, but just being exposed to the harshness of the elements is something that I think is worth talking about if we're going to talk about weather, at least me being here in California, because we are unhoused citizens who aren't able to seek shelter, now have to try and find ways to cool off or keep warm, and especially in a city where you think that most people move here because the weather is so nice, and that's why they're here, because they don't have to deal with the cold. And even though it's hot, it's not the desert, even though California is a desert. We're in a desert. But I'm going to throw it back to Joseph and see where he is at with what we've said to him, what he feels.
Thank you very much, both of you. And I want to hit on both of those topics. Number one, Rajee, you're talking about, I don't know if you know the name of the movie. It's a true story. It's called The Impossible. It was in 2012 was when the movie was made. It follows a real true life family that were separated by that tsunami in Indonesia while they were on vacation. It is one of the most powerful movies. It's making the hair on my arm stand up. It's one of the most powerful movies I've ever seen in my entire life. And if you watch the entire movie, if anyone has any doubt about creation and believing in a higher power, that movie should resolve that doubt because of what happens in that movie. To talk about that movie specifically, in reference to California specifically, well, where you're located at, it is technically a desert, and that's the reason why you have such extreme temperatures, where at nighttime it gets below 50 on a regular basis, and during the daytime it gets 70, 80, whatnot. And that's even, during the winter it gets even cooler. I've lived there before, Mick, and unfortunately, the last time that I lived there, I was going through a really bad time in my life a long time ago, and I was homeless. I was living on the street. I stayed at a homeless shelter. It was ice cold. I left with a backpack and left a very dangerous household that I knew that I should not be in. So I know firsthand what it's like to be homeless in Los Angeles, California, and be in the rain. And that rain is ice cold. It feels just like snow. So I do understand what you're talking about in reference to the weather extremes in California. There's a lot to talk about in reference to the California wildfires. I have a lot of statistics that I just pulled up. I want to suggest that a lot of people go watch The Impossible. It's a wonderful movie. It's about a horrible tragedy, but the end result of the movie is a wonderful thing. I don't know if either of you saw it. I'm sure you'll chime in if you do. In reference to tsunamis, I have a lot of data also as well, and also tornadoes. So I do want to remind people, because unfortunately this time, Mick and Rajee forgot to tell people how to get a hold of them. So I will do it for both of you. If you want to get a hold of that handsome, dashing man with those glasses, it's Mick at mysouthernexposure.site. And if you want to get a hold of the fabulously beautiful Rajee Narinesingh, activist, social person, you can get a hold of her, Rajee at mysouthernexposure.site. So I want to tease the audience, and then I will talk about a handful of companies for a couple minutes and give you two a break. I want to tease the audience about what my main topic is. My main topic is COVID. Unfortunately, it's a lot of unimaginable negatives, but by us talking about it with you at home, hopefully we're helping prepare you. And I also do want to do a shout out to Teresa from Minuteman Press, who watches our show every single week and says that the reason why she watches the show is that she really enjoys all of our different perspectives on the topics that we discuss. So thank you very much, Teresa from Minuteman Press, for watching the show, and we greatly appreciate you. But I will toss it back over to Rajee to talk about her tease for the trans update. Rajee, it's over to you.
Well, first of all, I saw that movie that you're talking about. Oh my God, fabulous movie. And that's so true what you said about it. It was like this family on vacation, they're wanting to have a good time, and then the tsunami hits and they end up getting separated. But what's so beautiful is the power of faith and love and just believing that they would make it through and survive. It's so profound in that movie, and so I recommend it to anyone to watch. It was excellent. Trans update. Well, you know, trans lives matter, okay? And I hate every time I have to talk about this topic, but one of the groups among trans people that I would say deal with the most violence and murder is Black transgender people, Black transgender women specifically. And I'm going to share a story with you all later in the show about a trans woman that recently was killed. So on that note, I'll toss it over to Mickey.
Thanks for that, Rajee, and appreciate you sharing that story with us, or you're going to be sharing that story with us. For this week, music-wise, I'm going to report back on Bandcamp Friday because that just happened last Friday. So that meant that all proceeds that were made on bandcamp.com for that day went directly to artists and to labels. So I put together actually an article for my own website suggesting suggesting a list of Black artists that people could check out. And they covered everything from bands that are making music to individual artists, rappers, dance musicians, folk singers. So I will touch on that a little bit, and then I'll also just touch on an album that I've really enjoyed this year called Jessie Ware's What's Your Pleasure? But I'm going to pass it back over to Joseph now, because mine is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Joseph?
Thank you very much, Mick, and thank you very much, Rajee, for both of your inputs. I am going to try, and because it's a live show, it's okay for me to say it. I'm going to try to do something new to make things look a little different and more enjoyable for our home audience. It was a suggestion from our executive producer, so an idea that I was working on as well. So let's see how this works out. We will see if it does. And if it does, we'll do it again. So WeGo LLC is a local company that operates in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, that also services Wilton Manors, the Middle River Terrace area, and Oakland Park areas as well. If you pre-plan with them, You can make your life a lot easier during these stress-filled times. If you need a ride to work, you want to get your grocery shopping done, they will even pick up your laundry. And we all know that we got some dirty laundry. There's no contact, no touch options that can make things so much safer and easier for you, as well as the drivers or delivery people. They will be wearing face masks and shields. And in addition, after each and every passenger in the car, they will be sanitizing as well. So I gotta tell you, you gotta visit www.wegollc.app to learn more. If you plan your trip 24 hours in advance, I would suggest that you do, because services are subject to availability. Don't forget, wegollc.app. Contact them today. You will definitely not regret it. If you are looking for a cleaning solution in the Wilton Manors, Middleborough Terrace area as well, do I have the answer for you? Yes, I do. Do I have the graphic? Not quite yet. So you're stuck looking at me. I'm sure everyone at home is probably sick of looking at me just like they are. If you have a vacation rental, if you need your pool cleaned, boats or cars, they've been doing it for over 10 years. They do have some new procedures and protective measures, however, but they are open and ready to serve you. Now with new no contact options to keep you and also their employees safe, I suggest that you contact them. You can email them. That's trustworthycleaners33304@gmail.com. Excellent references, local workers. You can help support a local business today by reaching out to them at trustworthycleaners33304@gmail.com. We'll see if it works well the third time. You know what they say, the third time's the charm? Hopefully it is. I got to tell you about Minuteman Press. Minuteman Press is where they design and promote you. It's business to help your business grow. Minuteman Press is there for all of your printing needs. They do business cards, flyers, promotional pieces. They even print on banners and whatnot. So I suggest that you make sure to call them at 954-731-5300. That's 954-731-5300. The reason why I stumbled with trying to say what all they do is basically they do everything. So if you contact them, you can figure out with them what you want to have done. They're right in Fort Lauderdale, just south of Wilton Drive on 4th Avenue. You can just call them directly, 954-731-5300. Call them today, learn more, tell them that Southern Exposure sent ya. Hopefully that worked. I don't know. So I think that it did. And I think it might have made things a little bit more interesting for the people at home. So let's talk about specifically weather and natural phenomena. I have a whole bunch of information, and I would like to start off first with hurricane season, specifically because it affects myself and Rajee the most, but I also have you covered with some earthquake material, and I also have some history about the Dust Bowl from 1930, as well as our Saharan dust storm that's coming. So I'm going to start off with the fact of the names for the 2020 hurricane season: Arthur, Bertha, Christabel, Dolly, Eduardo, Faye, Gonzalo, Hannah, Isaias, Josephine, Kyle, Laura, Marco, Nana, Omar, Paulette, Renee, Sally, Teddy, Vicky, and Wilfred. Believe it or not, those names recycle every 6 years. I don't know if a lot of people knew that. So they have those names they recycle, and then sometimes they, retire a name. I would presume that maybe they retire a name if the name, had a lot of damage. So what do you have prepared for hurricane season? Because it's right around the corner. Rajee, I'm going to go to you first.
Oh my God. I mean, okay, so I came down to South Florida in 1989. And, so I was here for the big one, Andrews. dear Lord. I tell you, that was my first time going through a hurricane, and it happened to be a really big one. The southern part of South Florida, Homestead, Kendall, that area, was absolutely demolished. Thankfully, I lived at that time in Northwest Miami. So we got it bad, but we didn't get it as bad as they did down south, South Miami, that is. So at the time, I was working for the American Red Cross, and my boss, my immediate supervisor, she had a home in Kendall, and literally the home was destroyed. They were in the house when the house was just falling apart. It was falling on top of them. And they had to run out to the garage to get in their truck they had a mattress like over them in the back of their truck. But it was like, her whole life flashed before her, and they had a really nice home, built well, but here it is in a matter of not so long, everything was just falling down on them. And so that was my first experience with hurricanes, and every year I do this. I'm like, oh dear Lord, please, let's have a smooth hurricane season. Because the thing is, now what I've noticed though, with the pattern of hurricanes here, is they hit us, we get a bad one. Well, this is how it's been, the average has been about every 7 years we get a really bad one. That's how it's been, because after Andrews, we had another one in 1999, that was Rita, if I'm not mistaken. That was pretty bad. Then after Rita, we had Wilma in 2005. And then after Wilma, we had, oh God, I forgot the name. Irma. Yes. And so let me tell you, I mean, and I can't remember, it was in the teens, 2015, 16, 17, something in that range. But I noticed that's like the pattern that we've been having. And so, hey, that's great. I can't even imagine having to deal with a full-on hurricane every year, every hurricane season. I think I want to just move from here, because the thing is, the hurricane is the one, that's one thing you're dealing with when it hits, and the storm, and you're trying to bunker down, and then afterwards, that's when hell begins. Well, let me explain what I mean by that. 95% of the time, you will lose electricity. 95%. Some people are more fortunate. They live on a grid that is like a busy avenue with maybe, a hospital or a Walmart or something like that, where the electricity, they get that usually up and running pretty quick. So they might not lose electricity, or if they lose it, it's only for a few hours. But if you don't live on one of those electrical grids, and it could just be a matter of a few blocks, you could be without electricity for like a week. I remember one particular one, I think that was the 2005 one, 3 weeks without electricity. And let me tell you, in the world that we live in, 3 weeks without electricity, you're basically living in third world conditions, because every single thing.
I got to tell you, that's what happened to me the Hurricane Irma, where we were at. We were without electricity. Ricky, how long was it? 15 days? We didn't have electricity for 15 days. And then the people on the other side of the street got it within like 2 or 3 days. So it was no cold food, no warm showers, no AC, no fans, can't charge your cell phone. It was freaking ridiculous. We lost a lot of stuff on Hurricane Irma because of the foundation in our house. So trust me, honey, I know what you're talking about, but that was nothing compared to what you've gone through. I'm sorry, I just had to share that, because you're absolutely right.
No, I'm glad you shared it, because you're like solidifying what I'm saying, because it's so true. And the thing about, we've advanced so far with technology, but the thing about technology is 9 out of 10, it needs electricity to work. So you can have all this wonderful technology in your house, and no electricity means you have nothing of it. You can't use it. You can't use your refrigerator. No, like Joseph was saying, no air conditioning. Um, I mean, even charging your cell phone, something quote unquote as simple as that. And, you know, it's hot as hell. And your food, you may like stock up, but you got to use that food within 2 days, 2 to 3 days, because it's going to spoil. It's going to spoil. So if you're going on like a week or so, a lot of times you are like going to be trying to find food to eat, you know. So it's heavy duty, and Lord knows I've been through my share, honey. I have been through my share of hurricanes. I remember the last one that hit in September, and it was it was like a month before I think Maria got it. Puerto Rico got Maria, which like demolished them, and also the Bahamas too. They were demolished. But the one we got, I was in my bed. It's like 3 in the morning, or 2 in the morning. It's hitting us. I mean, things are banging. I'm living in my little cottage there. I was in the bed covered up. I had my emergency safe, like it's a little briefcase safe with all my like important papers in case I had to grab it. And you know, this storm was relentless. It wasn't a fast moving storm. So we're talking about like 10 hours of storm all through the night. It was just, and it would quiet down for a little bit. And then here we go again. Boom, and the wind and the wind and the rain. And a couple of times I really thought, I was like, oh dear Lord, like the cottage is gonna just fall down. But the good thing about my cottage, it was made of concrete, so it's pretty, you know, it's pretty strong. But I was thinking maybe the roof or whatever. So yeah, Lord knows I've had my share. Mickey, have you ever been through a hurricane or earthquake or anything like that?
Well, I've never been through an earthquake, or what am I saying? I've never been through a hurricane, because most of the places that I've ever lived, hurricanes aren't really all that common. And the one time that there was a hurricane in the Northeast in Boston was in 2012, and I was actually abroad at that time. So I wasn't there for that hurricane. But so I've never been in a hurricane. There have been like maybe once or twice times in Ohio where like a storm might have felt bad enough that there could maybe have been a tornado, but it's not really flat where we are, or clear, so it wouldn't be easy for a tornado to kind of start. And again, like this isn't quite weather, but like here in California, like I've been in earthquakes before. Actually, last year, literally a year ago on the 4th of July, I was on a FaceTime call with my mother. I was just lying in bed, like, because it was probably like 9 or 10 my time, and my mom was calling from like noon time there. And I remember like as I'm talking to her, I start hearing things rumble and the room starts shaking, and I stop her from talking and I go, Mom, I'm just gonna have to let you know there's an earthquake going on right now. It was pretty sizable. It happened for, I don't want to say, no more than 10 seconds. And then a few days later, it might have even been the next day, there was another one, and to me it felt like a lot more, because that time I was with a friend. We were just hanging out at a house out on the back porch, and we were just having like wine and crackers and cheese and stuff, and I had actually just poured our drinks and made a motion to save them, and was just sitting in my chair thinking, okay, is this going to be like a really big one now? Because it happened so soon after the other. And it's definitely scary, especially because you don't know how big it's going to get. And really, they do come without warning. And when they happen like that, you are just thankful that it happened during the day where you maybe have a little bit of time to prepare. Because God forbid you get hit with a really bad earthquake in the middle of the night and you're just caught off guard. So that's something, I mean, that I think everyone who lives out here in California thinks about, just because there are so many ways that one can, in theory, get hurt out here. that it is something that people think about. But yeah, I mean, weather-wise out here, I said it's the heat, because not only does the heat lead to things like heat stroke, or on the other opposite end of the spectrum, hypothermia, which really does affect the homeless population out here, just because in past years, this is kind of going into another topic, but in 2017 was the first time that the U.S. has seen an increase in homelessness, and it says that homelessness rose by about 9% from 2016 to 2017, and so these are people who out here in LA, which has just a really, really serious homeless problem. These are people who are stuck out like in the sun for hours at a time, exposed to the elements. And so many different stores out here and businesses don't let customers in unless like you're paying for something, or unless like you unless you buy something. And if you don't buy something, then you're kicked out of there, and then you have to struggle on the street and try to find shade if you can, but that's not always easy to come by. So that's something that I think about when I think about really like weather patterns out here that can really do a person in. Because I mean, the heat can also lead to wildfires, which is obviously also something else to worry about. Wildfires are also, not to say that you can expect them coming, but usually California has been pretty good about notifying people like, all right, there's like a fire in your area, like people need to clear out. And then usually people are pretty smart about it. Like obviously it's a tragedy if anyone like loses their home or loses their like property to that, because that sucks. But usually I would say that most evacuation measures are usually pretty good. And I mean, thankfully this year we haven't, I mean, God forbid we have any wildfires this year, because where's everyone going to go? Just with the pandemic and everything. So, I mean, that is also something else that you just have to kind of worry about living out here in California. Like, you know that there could be a wildfire at any time. You could, I mean, if you're out and about, even just if you have a home, if you're just out and you're at the beach and you're not hydrating properly, or you're drinking a lot at the beach and you're just kind of sitting out in the sun and you're not paying attention, you can make yourself sick. So there's the heat, and just also with how dry it is, I mean, yeah, it could, like, there could very easily be wildfires out here. And again, not really a weather pattern, but you could also be killed by an earthquake. So it's it's a bit of a risk living out here in California. Just
oh my God, Mickey, I gotta say, you know, you talking about highlighting the homeless situation, I can't even imagine. Like, I've been through some stuff. I've been through some heavy duty stuff. But when I'm driving and I see homeless people, I'm like, oh dear Lord, that life must just be so hard. You don't have, you know, a roof over your head, a place to lay your head in peace at night, you know, to sleep. You need to use a bathroom. I mean, the basic human needs. And I just can't even, I always, when I see homeless people, I look at them and I think to myself, wow, that spirit is going through something and they're able to survive and endure that. And I kind of look at them in admiration almost, because I don't know if I could do that. And then, you know, Joseph, you were sharing about you being homeless. I didn't know that about your story. And my God, I can't even imagine how hard that was for you. But I just always do. I look at and I think about that, like, oh my God, if they're going to be cold, if the weather's cold, or if it's hot. I'm like, dear Lord, they must be burning up. Because,
exactly.
You know, so.
Well, it's also a thing that I also found while I was doing research, but it's a report from the National Weather Service, and it's a 2019 summary of weather events and fatalities that happened during them, and they have it all sorted by marine events, convection events, which are like storms and tornadoes and whatnot. And they have an extreme temperature section. And for 2019, the number of fatalities attributed to extreme cold were 35 deaths. So that means that 35 people in the United States died of cold, which, if you think about that in perspective of Los Angeles, the LA Times story that I was reading about, or I mentioned before, about hypothermia being a problem amongst LA's homeless population, over the last 3 years, 13 people have died, at least partly because of the cold out here in California. So if you're thinking about extreme cold, almost a third of that, ironically enough, is happening out here in California to our homeless population. And then conversely, on the other side of the spectrum, deaths due to extreme heat are actually a lot higher than anything like lightning, tornado, thunderstorms. Hail doesn't kill anyone, but they have it on here just because it does injure people. It injured one person last year, as an aside. But heat has killed, in 2019, it killed 63 different people. So when you think about, it's interesting because obviously we're talking about weather. We're talking about, I mean, with extreme cold and extreme heat, you don't think that just the temperature is the weather event that's going to kill you. You always think it's going to be the day after tomorrow's like tornado, or you think that it's going to be the big hurricane, or you think it's going to be a wildfire. And it's like, for a lot of people, what ends up being the deadliest thing is just the fact that it is simply too hot or too cold. And then if you just look at climate change exasperating everything and how cities are getting hotter, this is something that people are going to have to struggle with more and more. And until we kind of pay attention to that, it's really not going to get any better.
I agree with you, Mick. I agree with you, Mick, and I agree with you, Rajee, as well. I also have a story to share about having heat stroke. I'll share with you in a couple of seconds, but to go over some information about special accommodations. And I have a question for you too, Mick, also as well. In reference to, I'll get to that at the end, I guess. FEMA, I'm not a big fan of any government organization at all. However, they did release some data on May 20th, HQ 20146, Washington, to address the challenges of managing disaster response and recovery efforts during this year's hurricane season. FEMA is releasing the quote unquote COVID-19 pandemic operational guidance for the 2020 hurricane season to help emergency managers and public health officials best prepare for disasters while continuing to respond to and recover from coronavirus. The guidance can also be used to private sector and non-governmental organizations to gain an understanding of the government's posture, planning, and readiness efforts. The guide provides action emergency managers and public officials can take to prepare for response and recovery operations. Describe anticipated challenges to disaster operations posed by COVID-19, highlights planning considerations for managers, outlines how FEMA can plan to adapt for recovery operations, creates a shared understanding of expectations between FEMA and emergency managers, includes guidance, checklists, and resources to support emergency managers. The fact of the matter is that COVID is going to be affecting every single aspect of our life indefinitely, and no one knows the answer of what's going to happen when or next. I do want to touch upon two different things that you mentioned. Specifically in Florida, the heat is even more exacerbated than it is in California, Mick. Down here, in our homeless population, based off of 2019, Florida had an estimated 28,328 experiencing homelessness on any given day. And then in California, it was 151,000. So you have more homeless there based off of that data. But in reference to the extremity of hot and cold, I think that's part of the reason that's the biggest concern. But down here, you can get heat stroke within a matter of minutes. I mean, I'm sure Rajee knows if you sit in the car and your AC is not running, if you got makeup on, it's going to be gone. I mean, I was working and I was putting in pavers for someone. This is 5 or 6 years ago. And I was just working and working, thought that I had drank enough water. And all of a sudden I just passed out and knocked my head, and about 30 or 40 minutes later, I woke up. I mean, heat stroke is something that can happen, and it's absolutely frightening. Luckily, I was okay, and I was fine. But for my partner, Rick, when he had heat stroke, where he was working, when that happened, the person had to pick him up and put him in a pool to calm him down, and put ice underneath his armpits and in between his thighs to calm his body temperature down quickly. So I think a lot of times what's missing for homeless people in this regard is water. I think that's one of the biggest things, and it actually ties into California as well as the Midwest, and also down here in Florida. The conifers, in the biggest conifer, I should say one of the 6 biggest conifers, is going to take 6,000 years to refill. That's the Midwest conifer. I don't remember the name of it, but it's basically Montana-ish, that area, right under Texas and whatnot. And back in 1930, that's the same region that started to have the problem of the Dust Bowl. And right now we're going through down here in southern Florida, and actually all across the United States. I'll show you a photograph in a moment when we get back, after you both can chime into what I'm talking about. The Dust Bowl was something that affected everyone for 10 years. Crops in the United States failed, people died, children were outside and choked by the dust and died in their cute little outfits because they didn't even know about anything to do. These were little children walking to school or walking from school. And this is in the 1930s when no one even knew better. It just looked like it was dusty. And then they died. And there's 3.5 million was the estimate that I pulled up that died from the 1930 Dust Bowl. And yes, 3.5 million people were negatively affected. They don't have exact numbers of death, but a lot of people moved from that region into California. Some people moved down here into Florida. Some people moved up north. I'll show you a photograph in a little bit, but that's something to just keep in the back of your head. And then in reference to the earthquakes, I've experienced one once before. Up in Ohio, they even have earthquakes. And actually down here, we don't have earthquakes, but in Cuba or Puerto Rico, they do. So talking about a tsunami, unfortunately for Rajee and me, we're in the perfect spot. If there is an earthquake, that we could have a tsunami, and then we have to address that. But my question for you, Mick, is thinking for homeless people in regard to all of your experience and everything that you know, what would you suggest that they have on them to be able to survive an earthquake, cold, or heat? There is a program called Backpacks for Homeless in New York City. Do you have something any similar to that in California or no?
I mean, there are many, many different homeless advocacy groups and different groups that offer different types of services. There are soup kitchens. There are ones who provide shelter. In fact, when I was also doing research for this, I came across a organization there called, hold on, I have it here on my computer. They're called Martha's Village and Kitchen, and they are located in, I don't remember where they're located. I believe it's in Indio, California, but they provide cooling centers for homeless people to come to and cool off, come into air conditioning, to have water, to have just a little bit of time to step out of the heat for a little bit. Yeah. I know that many advocates who are able to offer the shelter of their cars and whatnot will drive around, and if they happen to see someone on a very hot day, offer them a ride in the car where they can sit in. Usually the person has a larger van where they have a bunch of coolers in there. They have their AC on. There's not a ton of windows in it, so it stays cool in there. The sun's not making it any hotter. And oftentimes what they will do, and a good thing that you can oftentimes offer, to someone if you happen to have an extra one, but they have Metro tap cards. Every time you get them at the Metro stations out here, anytime you ever pay for a ticket, you get a Metro card. And if you give a Metro card to someone, that lets them get on the bus, which oftentimes has AC, or it lets them go to a different part of the city where they might be able to find shelter, or it lets them just go down into the Metro system where they can at least just be out of the sunlight. It still can get kind of warm out there, but it's not as terrible as if you're just sitting out on a street. And I mean, obviously there are certain things that it's helpful for anyone to have. Like obviously if you're out in sweltering heat, it's great to have a hat and to have water, or if you're in the cold, it's good to have a jacket or something. But it's hard to say for someone who doesn't even have shelter to be like, oh, you should have this in your like selection of things, because it's like there are a lot of people who, where they happen to live, they're like, I can't hold on to things safely because I'm in a wheelchair and I'm not able, like if someone were to rob me of my jacket that I used to stay warm, or the water that I've been using to stay cool, I can't do anything because I'm not able to, I'm maybe not able to chase them. I'm not saying that just someone who happens to be in a wheelchair happens to be defenseless, but like they are at a disadvantage. And a lot of homeless people are disabled. A lot of homeless people suffer from mental illness and suffer from other types of disease. So really the first and foremost thing that homeless people need is they need shelter. So it's important to know about places like Martha's Village or other advocacy groups in your area, whether it's things like K-Town for All, or SELA, SELA, Los Angeles. They offer meals to our homeless brothers and sisters out there. It's the best thing that we can do as people who are lucky enough to have jobs and have shelter and have things that we can offer and things to spare, is to donate to organizations and groups that are doing this type of work and are offering this type of help to people, because we can't expect them to do all of that work because they're already trying to survive. And saying like, oh, you should have this, like, so that you can survive out in the heat. It's like, what we should actually be doing is, all right, here are the things that we can offer you, and here's the shelter that we can offer you. But that's what I think.
Do you think, or have you experienced it, that in the past I have, where some people that are homeless have a lot of pride and they don't want to accept help, I should say. They don't want to accept help. I mean, I know for myself and my partner, we've helped people in person, gave them food directly, gave them clothing, let them use our electric cord to charge items, help them try to get their Social Security, help take them to doctor's appointments. We've done that very many times over the years, given work to people who are capable of working. So, but for some people, I think, and I don't know if what your experience is with this, but I've been, myself, my partner, been helping people for over 10 years down here in Southern Florida, and in person, not just donating to a gigantic corporation, because some of those people don't want to go to a big corporation and stand in a food line or stand to ask for help. They don't want it. So my question, and actually I'm going to ask Rajee, because I can see her nodding also as well. What do you think about that, Rajee?
Well, okay, so first of all, here in South Florida, it is pretty brutal because not only is it hot, but we have the humidity, which makes it even worse. It's tropical, so it's thick. It's like sauna-like. So it's funny, the other day, like I keep my place very air conditioned, and so I was home and I had to go out, and as soon as I opened the door, I forgot. I was like, oh damn! It hit me in the face. It was like I was walking into an oven or a sauna, and so the elements are very brutal, and it's easy to get dehydrated, like Joseph was saying, like very quickly. So it's like, damn, how many bottles of water do you need to love with you? Because if you're homeless, I mean, you're like on the go and you're like transient and you're like, so it's hard to like move stuff like that around. And I love the program they have out in California. I think that's wonderful because, you know, to give some relief by giving them a ride somewhere and air conditioning and there's a, you know, drinks for them and that sort of thing. It's temporary relief, but at least it gives them a reprieve from the brutal element. I don't know. I was having a conversation with someone, and I got to say that thank God for air conditioning. I think I would be such a miserable bitch, excuse my language, if there was not air conditioning because it's so uncomfortable, and especially in elements like we're dealing with now. When we lost power, the house is so hot, and you're like, I was literally taking like 5 showers a day, or like soaking in a bath, and just like, you know, really to keep yourself cool. And so I was having a conversation with someone. They actually live in England. They're in London, nice house, but they don't have air conditioning. And I was like, you all don't have air conditioning? And he says a lot of people don't get it. And it's so funny how we Americans, we're used to that because I said to him, even poor people, like if you have an efficiency and you're poor, most poor people still have an air conditioner. Like, you know, that's kind of like the thing with us. That's like one of the things that we just tend to have because it brings such relief. It plays with you even with sleeping and all of that. So to be homeless and out there in the elements and you're sweating and you're getting dehydrated and just being so you don't have anywhere to really get relief from the elements. I always say, like, even if you have an efficiency, you're blessed because you have your own little, your own little spot where you can feel comfortable to lay your head comfortably, and you have a bathroom to use, and stuff that's just basic human needs. I mean, that's just basic. So, I don't know. It's a problem. I drive around here in South Florida, and I see quite a lot of homeless people. And the thing about the homeless population is it's a mixture. You have you have homeless people that are dealing with mental health issues. Then you have the ones that because they hit up on hard times, they end up homeless. You know, it's like a mixture there. And I'm going to share a quick story. The other day I was driving and there was a homeless woman, young girl, probably in her early 20s. She was homeless. So she was like walking by the cars, like asking for money. So sometimes I will give, because the other element is the drug element too. A lot of them are on drugs. So they take the money and they're using it for drugs. So it's like such a mixed bag. But this girl, I rolled my window down and I handed her $1. And she looks at me and she says, give me another one. And I was like, I didn't have any extra. That was the only $1 I had. And I'm sorry, I don't have another $1. Yes, you do. And she started banging on my window. And I had to get I had to get like stern with her. I was like, hey, you better stop it. And that's when I really said, oh my God, it's such a mixed bag. Here it is, I was trying to help this girl, and she's probably dealing with mental health issues. So yeah, it's a really difficult thing, and I think that cities can do more, like a lot more, to help their homeless population because it's inevitable. People will be homeless. It's inevitable. What do you got to say, Mickey?
Well, I think I'm definitely going to go back to, I think there was a point that Joseph made a little bit earlier about if in my experience I've encountered anyone who doesn't want help. And I think that operating with operating, even thinking that that's a thing that is going to maybe dissuade you from maybe like helping out a homeless person, I just think is really unhelpful thinking. I'm going to be honest with you, and like I can't speak for the entire homeless population because I'm also not homeless, but I will say that the vast majority of people who happen to be homeless did not choose to be so. And the vast majority of people, even if they are homeless and they chose to be homeless, it's like if they are out in the cold or they are stuck in the heat, it's like they should have the right to like go into a building lobby to cool off or go into a building lobby to heat up. But there are ordinances where it's like you're not allowed to sit on like the front steps of a building, like underneath their like awnings. Yeah, that's the word exactly. But you're not able to sit under their awnings because it's like a type of loitering. And I just think that I think that going into the mindset of like, all right, you're going to maybe be like helping out a homeless person, the assumption that they don't want your help, or that just because like they chose this life for themselves, that like they're better off than someone who didn't choose this, I think is just very unhelpful. And I think it also contributes to a lot of ideas and preconceptions that people have in this country about homeless people being lazy. That people have this idea that, oh, you're living on the street because you're not trying hard enough. And it's like, no, there are no jobs right now. And a lot of the really good ones happen to be ones that in order for you to get, you have to have a college degree, which costs a lot of money. Or if you happen to have a quote unquote good job and you have a degree, and then God forbid you come down with a terrible, terrible illness and your healthcare is not able to cover all the costs for that, and then you end up becoming homeless. It's like, I think people just have this idea that people just become homeless because like they just lost their job and then didn't go about finding another one. And it's like, that's not what happens. Like that doesn't happen. Like people don't just decide one day that they're just going to like be homeless. And I mean, I guess you would say that if that maybe was someone's decision, it's like, why did they choose that? Like what trauma did they go through? Like what happened to them that they thought, I would be better off homeless than I would be if I was in shelter. So me personally, anytime that I've ever given anything to anyone, or anytime that I've like encountered anyone on the street, I've never had anyone really turn down just if you are offering anything. And I've never had anyone get in my face about offering anything. I think, and this isn't to say like you have to give $1 to every homeless person that you see, because that's also obviously not feasible. But I think the idea is that I don't even know where I'm necessarily trying to take this at this point, but I think back to my original point, I don't think it's helpful to assume that if a homeless person is homeless, that like automatically, oh, they just chose to be there. Or that might even be a possibility, because who cares? They're probably suffering, especially if it's a really hot or really cold day. It's like, regardless of whether or not you chose that for yourself, like that's still not something that anyone should ever have to go through. It's inhumane, it's unfair, and if you can help out, you should help out, because a lot of us have more than we know what to do with.
Well, Mickey, what you sound like, really, when you look at life, it's like she said, like most of them didn't choose that. It's like a set of circumstances that got them there, and I think like a lot of people.
Oh, Rajee, I think you muted yourself.
Yeah, no, I think she accidentally did.
Happening, or a few things happening, you fall from the top and you go to the bottom. So, I mean, how many people on an average here in America are living from like paycheck to paycheck, or if it's not one paycheck, like a few paychecks, And then
I would guess probably 90% of people are paycheck to paycheck. It might be more than that. And then, but just to reiterate the fact, just so that you understand, Mick, I didn't suggest the idea that someone should not donate or not try to help someone My question was, with your experience, how many people do you think don't want any help because they want to be independent? And
Exactly.
down here,
I
down,
think
down
go
here,
on.
you've been really lucky because you've never had a negative experience with someone who's been homeless. Myself, over here in Florida, and it clearly with Rajee, she had gone through something similar also as well. Some, I'm not saying all, some homeless people that I've experienced, they are aggressive and mean and nasty if you don't give them money. They ask you, you don't have any money on you, you're getting gas. They're like they wait and they wait in front of the door for you to come out. So if you have change, if I have change, I give it to them. If I have $1, I give it to them. But I think you've been very fortunate, and I hope that you never have that experience happen because it would dissuade you. It does not dissuade me from helping when I can.
Yeah, I think that like having the mentality at all that like this just goes into, and I'm not saying that you do this consciously or that like it's not something that we can all work on, because I think all of us have preconceptions and assumptions that we make about homeless people. It's the way that like it's been presented in media. It's the way that capitalism has taught us, like in order for you to make a life for yourself, like you have to work really hard, and like if you don't work really hard, you end up homeless, and that's just your fault. um that plays the idea that there are like that homeless people, like you have to worry about whether or not they're going to be nasty, or whether they're not, like whether or not they're going to hurt you, or whether or not they're going to like demand something of you. I mean, here is the grand scheme of things, and I don't mean this to say like put yourself in danger or anything, but in the grand scheme of things, if you are feeling threatened by a homeless person, the fact of the matter is that literally everything is on your side. Like God forbid you're like by yourself, but it's like if you have a phone, and I'm not saying that you should do this, because again, calling the police is a really great way to get a homeless person who is going through a lot killed. But I just think that it's this idea that worrying about whether or not a homeless person is going to be nasty to you, or worrying about whether or not a homeless person is going to ask you for money, I think just that plays very, very much into the stigmas that people have about homeless people. And it's why a lot of people aren't able to get help, or why people aren't willing to help, because they think that homeless people chose this. I'm not saying that you are personally think that, but I think that that line of thinking, and I mean, you asked my opinion on this, has this ever happened to me and what I think of it. I just think that that is not really a helpful way to think about homelessness, because as I also said, I don't think that most people chose to be out here living on the streets. And for that matter, I can understand why a homeless person would be angry about things, because it's like Rajee said, a lot of these things that happen to us, these are circumstances. It's like it's unfair when you all of a sudden you develop a rare type of cancer, and then on top of developing this rare type of cancer, your partner left you, or your partner is also sick, and so that puts both of you on the street. And because of that, you're not able to keep your job, you're not able to keep your pet, because a bunch of animal advocates took your pet away from you because they think that you are not suitable enough, being a homeless person, to give that pet any care, which isn't fair. And again, I'm not saying that this is something that you prescribe to, and clearly, like you said, you have helped, you've done volunteer work before, and you've helped homeless people directly. But I do think that the idea and the mentality that like you might come across a homeless person who like is going to, in theory, put your life in danger or ruin your life, I think is a dangerous way of thinking. And I think it's a way of getting out of like doing the work that needs to be done, because we as people who don't want for too much have in a lot of ways a responsibility to give some of that back, because it's like I am lucky enough that I have a disposable income that I'm not just worried about spending on things like rent and food and other stuff like that. Like I pay for internet, I pay for television, I pay for desserts. Like if I want to drive and if I want to go anywhere, I pay for Lyfts and Ubers. Like I have a lot of that money, and like, yes, obviously I'm entitled to have the joys in life as well, as everyone is, but you have to think about how there are people who aren't allotted those opportunities, and the fear and like the idea that you should be afraid of these type of people or like worried about letting them take advantage of you is, again, I just don't think a very helpful way of looking at homelessness in this country, because it is already so demonized and it is already so stigmatized that to worry about that type of thing, I don't think does anyone any services per se. I'm not saying, and again, I'm not saying that this is like a fault that you necessarily have, but I do think that it's something that, since you brought up, it is something that we should talk about, or at least I've addressed.
Clearly, I agree with you completely. And actually, I was trying to pull up the video, and Rajee, you might have seen it, and Mick, you might have already seen it before. And if either of you can find it before the end of the show, I would love to share it with the people at home so they can watch it themselves. It's the video of the guy that's standing at a bus stop, and then he sees someone on a bicycle that rides by. And then the guy that's on the bicycle, or the girl that's on the bicycle, sees someone in a car that goes by. And then that person sees someone in a fancy car. And then that person looks up to the sky and sees someone in an airplane. And then that person looks out the window and sees someone in a private jet. And then that person, it's like a series of videos. And it's a very, I think, good video for people to see, to understand the humility of what you do have, to be appreciative of what you do have at that point in time, because it can all be taken away at the drop of a hat. And at the end of the day, COVID can take you, me, a billionaire, a millionaire, a trillionaire out within one last breath. Whether you're homeless or not, whether you're black or white, whether you're gay or trans, whether you're Protestant or Catholic, it does not matter. I mean, it can happen no matter how. And that's one of those things where I wish I could find it. I was trying to find it because it is such a good video. I don't know if, Mick, you've seen it. I don't know if you've seen it before, Rajee, but you were shaking your head. But it is a very good video to watch. I think it's about 8 minutes long, and it's a transition from person to person that thinks that the other person has it better than they do.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it, but I totally get it. And I love the whole concept of the video, because isn't it so true? That's how life is, you know. The guy that's walking is looking at the guy that's on a bicycle thinking, wow, he's lucky. And then the bicycle guy's looking at the guy in the car and saying, wow, he's, you know, and so on and so on and so on. It's such a domino effect. Yeah.
Well, we have a lot more to talk about. And I got some harsh numbers to go over for Florida. I know that you're probably following your numbers out there in California. We got a lot more to discuss. I do want to talk about a couple of companies, and then we're going to start with the actual segments. So I don't know if you have anything else to add, Mick. I didn't want to cut you short, but I did want to acknowledge the fact that I do agree with you, and I do agree with Rajee as well, and all of us are on the same page. But it's one of those things where if you do have a negative experience, whatever that negative experience is, whether someone's rich or they're poor, it doesn't make a difference. Or if they're black or they're white, it doesn't make a difference. And it's hard to remove a negative situation just instantly. It takes time to do that. So it's just one of those things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I see what you're saying. I just also think that with that in mind as well, to say that a negative situation is no different, regardless of what your background is or like where you're coming from. I'm not saying that like it doesn't suck to have someone yell at you, and it doesn't suck. It sucks to have someone call you out for like being like, why won't you give me another dollar? But again, remember what this person is going through. They're homeless. They don't have a home, and they're asking if you can spare a dime, you can spare an extra dollar. You are made mildly uncomfortable because someone's yelling at you. So I think that that's another thing where it's just like, again, I'm not trying to start.
Well, I totally understand what you're saying, Mick, because in that situation, I still was the one that had like all the benefits. I was in a car, an air-conditioned car, that I could press on the gas and drive away. I mean, I totally get what you're saying. Yeah, it was a little uncomfortable for me. It was a little uncomfortable, but at the same time, I was still the one that, had the leverage. I had more leverage. So I
Exactly.
totally get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like I don't think that we're telling anyone to like be unsafe here or to put yourself in like a terrible situation, but I think assuming that you could have a bad situation with a homeless person is like just not helpful. I don't think that it does anything for like the image that homeless people already have in this country. I don't think it's going to be very good for you if you want to do homeless advocacy, because you're never going to go the full 9 yards if you're constantly thinking like, oh, is this person going to yell at me? Are they going to get me sick? Are they going to rob me? It's like, no, they're probably not, because what they want is your help. They don't want to take advantage of you. Like they have been taken advantage of. So that's.
I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. I want to talk about a couple of companies, and then we can start to redirect back onto the updates. The trans update from Rajee, the music update from Mick, the Carlitta corner, which is going to be the new Midwest update, and then my COVID update also as well. So if you guys can just bear with me for a moment, I would greatly appreciate it. Just basically trying to do what I did successfully before, and we'll see if it does work. So if you do the haircut that I have, there is a great place, or I should say person, to have do it. Kat Rio provides a custom haircut that will suit your individual personality. That's her beautiful photo right there. Hi, I'm Kat Rio. Well, not me. She's Kat Rio. You'll never have to worry about looking like anyone else ever again, and you can stand out from the rest. Kat Rio will come to you 7 days a week. She will make your life easier. You can stay safer at home. She comes to our house. She's turned into a good friend. And you're also helping someone in the community. And I'm sure there's probably someone in Los Angeles or in Hollywood, Florida, or up in Cleveland, Ohio, where we have viewers as well. If you live in the Fort Lauderdale area, then I suggest you contact her. Or if you live in Wilton Manors, all you got to do is just text message her, 954-984-4040, or visit catriocuts.com. Kat Rio Cuts. She does a good job. I got to tell you about La Madame Supermarket. It is perfect if you are looking for a great deal on produce, meats, or everyday grocery items. They're here in Fort Lauderdale near Middle River Terrace. My partner and I shop there regularly to get our ginger and turmeric and make our healthy drinks in the morning. Their address is 1548 Northeast 4th Avenue in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Their number is 954-314-7489. I think you should check them out for yourself. I think you're going to like them. And you'd also be helping out a local small-owned business. On your next grocery store run, I suggest you go there. It's La Madame Supermarket, 954-314-7489. And make certain to tell them that My Southern Exposure sent you. If you are looking for a cleaning solution in Wilton Manors or Middle River Terrace area or Fort Lauderdale, do I have the answer for you? Yes, I do. Do I have the graphic for you? No, I don't. But next week, I will. They've been cleaning houses, vacation rentals, pools, boats, and cars for over 10 years. They do have some new procedures and protective measures, but they are open and ready to serve you. Now with new no-contact options to keep you and their employees safe. You can email them directly at trustworthycleaners33304.com. Excellent references, local workers. You can help support another local business down here in the Fort Lauderdale area. That's trustworthycleaners33304@gmail.com. WeGo LLC is a locally owned company that operates in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Also services the Wilton Manors, Middle River, and Oakland Park area as well. If you pre-plan your trip with them, you can make your life easier during these stress-filled times. If you need a ride to or from work, they can help you. If you need your grocery shopping done, they can do it. or if you have dirty laundry like everyone does, they can take it, pick it up, wash it, dry it, and drop it back off with no contact, no option, I should say no touch options, to make your life easier and make the drivers and delivery people safe. They will be wearing face masks and shields, and in addition, after each and every passenger in the car, they will be sanitizing as well. You can visit www.wegolollc.app to learn more. Plan your trip 24 hours in advance, as services are subject to availability. Don't forget, that's wegolollc.app. Contact them today. You will definitely not regret it. So, Rajee, I'm going to go to you first. I would love to hear your trans updates. And I know there's bad news, but I hope there's also some good stuff that we can share as well.
Well, I don't know about this stuff, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, every time I hear about another death of a transgender woman of color, well, any transgender for that matter, usually it's a trans woman of color. It's just such a reality check for me because I happen to be a transgender woman of color. And and so my heart goes out to that person. And at the same time, it's scary for me because I'm like, wow, that could have been me. You just never know. And so it's the harsh reality that we deal with, and it's continuing to happen over and over and over again. We had a death here in South Florida, actually it was a murder, of a young trans woman, 27 years old. Her first name is Bree Black. That's what she went by. And I don't know her. I looked up the story and I looked at pictures. She doesn't look familiar to me. And that's kind of odd for me because I tend to know like most of the trans people here in South Florida, even if we're not friends or, like connected per se, I know of them. But I don't know her. And so not knowing her, I mean, because when I heard the name, really, I was like, oh my God, because I know a few trans women that go kind of by that name. And I was thinking, oh my God, it's them. And of course, when you know someone, it's even more like of an emotional thing because you knew the person. But when I looked it up, I realized I didn't. So I don't know. It's just one of those things. I think it continues to happen. Look at all the stuff going on. Black Lives Matter, Trans Lives Matter, and even with all of this, it continues to happen. They're still doing an investigation, so I don't have the whole story per se. All I know is that she was shot outside of her apartment complex, and so I'm sure as the week goes on, we'll get more information about her murder. But yeah, so anyway, I guess to say something positive would, for me personally, I just, I think stories like this give me like the fuel and the fire to continue my activism. It solidifies that, it affirms that for me, that my work isn't over and I have to continue in my own unique way to do my activism. It's so important. Although we've come a long way, we still have a long way to go, obviously, with a story like this. And so that's what I would say the positive thing, quote unquote, that comes from the story would be for me, that it's just inspired me to continue my activism. And hopefully one day, I don't know if I'll see that day. I don't know if I'll ever see that day, but at least I know that when my life is over, that I didn't sit down and I just didn't do anything about it. At least I tried to do something about it. So, well, on that note, I'm going to pass it over to one of you two.
Okay, I'm gonna continue this story because I'm sorry for getting you so upset by bringing up the topic with you earlier in our conversation. I do want to give some information out to people so that they can help Rajee and we can help track down this horrible murderer. Her name was Cameron Breon. She was 27 years old, of Pompano Beach, not far from where I live, or not far from where we live. She was found on the ground with an apparent gunshot wound, investigators said. Pompano Beach Fire Rescue pronounced Brianna dead at the scene at about 10:30 p.m. It was homicide, and detectives are seeking the public's help in identifying the shooter. And that's part of the reason why I had suggested discussing this with you earlier. So, Crime Stoppers is very interested, and we have a lot of people down here that are watching the show, Rajee. So, if we can help them find this criminal, that would be fabulous, and help get. And actually, it's Breon, was also known as Bree, quote unquote, Nuck. I don't know what that means, N-U-K. So investigators are asking anyone with information about this case to contact Detective Lewis Bonhomme. That's Detective Lewis Bonhomme at 954-321-4377. You can contact Detective Lewis Bonhomme at 954-321-4377 so we can help track down this person who took this beautiful girl away from us. And her photo is stunning. And I understand I don't know how you feel specifically, Rajee, but you know how much I love you and how much Mick loves you and how much so many of people love you. And we cannot stand for that kind of behavior. And every time that something like this happens, we need to discuss it on the show. If you know of something that happened, Mick, you got to let us know out there in Los Angeles. If you know something, we have to keep talking about this because we can't stop doing it, because we have to do something. We have to stop.
You know, I love that, because there was a time where if there was a transgender murder, the police didn't really do that much to investigate. It was almost like, well, you know, another one gone, like good riddance type attitude. And so police were not vigilant. They would do a little, like, you know, light investigation, but they weren't vigilant with trying to find out who murdered a particular trans woman. Now I'm starting to see a difference. And so hopefully, you know, keep giving the number out there. There will be someone that maybe calls and gives the police a tip, because they do seem to be a little more interested and a little more assertive in doing the investigation with our death. At least I've noticed a difference here locally as opposed to like 10 years ago or even 15 years ago. So yeah, that's one positive thing that I've seen. So hopefully they will find her murderer.
To give some more specifics, because someone might be watching this show today or they might see it another day. The specifics about the events that happened that night. It was Friday night. That's this past Friday night, July 3rd. And it happened at 10 p.m. in the 200 block of Northwest 12th Street in Pompano Beach. That's, once again, 10 p.m. If you or anyone you know was in that neighborhood on the 200 block of Northwest 12th Street in Pompano Beach, please, we implore you to call Detective Lewis Bonheim, 954-321-4377. That's Detective Lewis Bonheim, 954-321-4377, because we have a great opportunity to be able to reach into over 5,000 people in our neighborhood and up in Cleveland, but most of those people are probably down here. So hopefully someone will see the show today and also next week, or continue to watch it, and we can help them find this criminal, and hopefully she can get some justice, and also her family can. Mick, do you have anything to say?
I, first of all, really appreciate what you had to share with us, Rajee. I know that's not easy to bring up, and I know that this topic is very difficult for us to continue talking about, because it just seems to be one that continues to be had, that Black trans women, especially Black trans women in this country face a disproportionate amount of violence. They're disproportionately affected by homelessness. They are also the ones disproportionately affected by COVID as it's going on right now. And I think that stories like Cameron Breons are very important to keep alive and keep remembering. Another thing that I remember another trans activist had posted on Twitter, or maybe it was on Instagram, I don't quite remember, but they made a point that don't just remember us when we're dead, remember us when we're alive. So it makes a good point. It begs a good point to know about trans people that you can support in your daily lives, whether they're artists, whether they're artisans who happen to make a certain type of product or clothing that you like, or they, I mean, because trans people are everywhere. They're part of our daily lives. They're people that you might know, people that you don't know. And it's important that I think that we talk about this topic. I think if anything, my 5-minute segment, I would rather talk about this instead of just my music update, because I don't find that my music update is as important as what this is right now. I think also what's important is the thing that Rajee also brought up, that is a thing that we need to pay attention to, is that we as citizens need to make sure that police departments are investing their resources in the deaths of these women, because the thing is that they often don't care. If you want to call the Pompano Police Department in general, not just to offer any sort of tips, but to also just let people in that department know that this is a case that you care very much about getting solved, and that there's justice for Cameron and her family and close friends and relatives. You can call the Pompano Beach Police Department at 954-786-4201. The non-emergency line as well, the County Dispatch Center, is 954-764-HELP, which HELP is 4357. Again, that number is 954-764-4357. So that's another thing that we can do. And another thing that people can do day to day is that you can call police departments, even if you don't have a tip. You can at least say that this incident, I care very much about you guys putting your resources into this and making sure that this woman's murder is solved, because so many of them just go unsolved because, as Rajee said, there is a presumed lack of interest in them, which that really isn't the case, and that shouldn't be the case. A person was murdered, people should be going about every means that's necessary and every means that they can possibly take to make sure that this person's killer is found and that justice is served, because these types of things happen all the time. For example, there's another incident where in 2019, a Black trans woman in Oregon, her name was P.T. Gully, she was found hanged in Portland, and the police wrote off her death as a suicide, even though the circumstances around her death were very suspect. People who knew her didn't suspect her to be suicidal, and her own family believes that she may have been killed. And she was hung in a very public place, and also hanging yourself is very, very difficult to do from a tree. It's hard to just be able to maneuver yourself and be able to do that. So it's weird that the police just they wrote it off and they're like, oh, this person must have just killed themselves, when it's they were probably the victim of a very terrible crime. So it's important that we talk about people like Cameron Breon. It's important that we talk about women like T.T. Gully. It's important that we talk about all of these women, because this is a problem that, to beat a dead, that's not a correct statement, I'm not gonna say that, but to reiterate another point and to just hammer it home, it's that we are still talking about this in 2020, and things don't seem to be getting any better. People are still very hateful. People are still very bigoted towards trans women, and they just face more violence than I ever will, and that many of us ever will. So I think that it's important that we bring up these topics, and I'm glad that Rajee addressed it in her own personal segment, because I think that it's important that we bring that up, and that's why I wanted to donate my time or dedicate my time to that. But if anyone else has any responses that they want to say to that, or things that they think are helpful, or organizations that they would suggest supporting, I would love to hear that as well.
I do, and thank you so much for adding that perspective, Mick. And also, I don't know why I'm sharing so much information today, but I think that part of our show is to talk about things that might not necessarily be comfortable. My brother was murdered about 25 years ago in the driveway of my birth mother. So, and they still do not know who did it, how it was done, but he was shot in the stomach and died in 1993.
Wow. Yeah, that's such a difficult thing. I mean, I can't even imagine losing a relative, you know, someone that you love to gun violence. Oh my God, no matter who they are.
Well, they're still trying to find out who did it. So that's the reason why I wanted to talk with you about this before. If anyone knows what happened, it was the West 15th and 16th area by Detroit and Lincoln Road in Cleveland. So if you can contact the police, that would be great. It's a long time ago. It's a really long time ago.
But it's a long time ago, but you see how the pain is still fresh. You know, like even though the years have gone by, that doesn't make it any less for your loss. And so that's the thing. You know, people think, oh, yeah, it's been 20 years or whatever, 20-something years, but it's still a loss for you. And every life, you know, that people may look at life like, oh, that person wasn't important. What were they doing for society, or et cetera, et cetera. But that person had people that loved them. You know, they had a family, they had friends. And so you're a perfect example of that, Joseph.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna try to let's shift the focus or something, because I didn't realize that this topic would get so heavy. I mean, I think the best
Mickey,
thing.
why don't you suggest like some music, at least one artist, so we'll change the topic a little bit. Like,
that sounds great. Now he's looking off to the side. He's looking off to the side like he doesn't know even what to say right now. He's caught off guard.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think if that's what we kind of want to go with, like, I can definitely give like something to lighten the mood. It seemed, especially with after what Rajee brought up, I think it was important to highlight that, just because that is something that, again, is brought up all the time, and there's very little that has been done about it. But I appreciate you also sharing your story as well, Joseph. And it also just goes to show that there's a lot of things in this country that aren't working properly, and things that aren't, I don't, like, for lack of a better term, that are failed. I mean, it's the fact that many police aren't able to solve many of the murders that happen. And that, like, again, that's another thing that kind of we have to look at law enforcement and think about, okay, why is it that we have law enforcement what can we say about the successes of law enforcement if so many of these murders go unsolved? And not just the murders of Black trans women, but like the murders of anyone that happen to go unsolved. It's like, you think that, like, oh, if someone gets killed, that their killers are going to be brought to justice, but that doesn't happen often, and that's hard to live with. So that's something else that I just think people should maybe sit and think on as well, that a lot of people are suffering from the fact that law enforcement doesn't always provide a closure for that type of thing. So that's something to think about. But I guess in the spirit of maybe lifting our spirits, I will talk about my music update, and this is a little bit different than the ones that I've done in the past because I've done recommendations of artists that you can find on Bandcamp and ones who you can support on Bandcamp. This time I'm just going to talk about an album that was really good. Not even that was very good. It's still very good. It's an album by this British vocalist by the name of Jessie Ware. She is very similar to Sade, Adele, a lot of dance music artists. She's got a very, very beautiful, very understated voice. Every time she goes for a note, it never feels like she's reaching for a note. Everything is very perfect, very clean, very crisp, very sophisticated. And her new album that she just came out with, it's her 4th album. It's called What's Your Pleasure? And it is a fusion of funk, disco, house music. It's the type of music that we'd be listening to right now in the summertime if we were allowed outside. It's a really danceable record. You could listen to it at a barbecue. You could listen to it at a club. It wouldn't sound out of place either way because it's just really fantastic dance music. One of my friends pointed out that they thought that it kind of reminded them a little bit of like a Rick James record, that it was just kind of like a little bit old school, a little bit 80s, a little bit 70s. It's very much disco, but it's got a very funky edge to it. A lot of really great bass lines in that song in that album, and her voice just sounds incredible. The songs that I would recommend are Overtime, the title track, which is also called What's Your Pleasure, Remember Where You Are, I believe that's the name of the title of that, or of the last song on the album, and there's a song called Step Into My Life, all of which are guaranteed to make you dance, sung to you by a woman who is just a very fascinating artist. If you want to look up a really great piece that was written just in music journalism recently, they did a profile on her for The Guardian, where she talks about her experiences in music and how she kind of took a step back from music before releasing this album, and how it really changed her relationship to the music that she made and how she appreciates it a little bit more now that it's not her, this is what she says, but it's not her bread and butter anymore. So she became less concerned about making a hit record and just making the music that she wanted to make. So again, I really recommend Jessie Ware's What's Your Pleasure. It is one of the best albums of the year. I'm not the only one saying that. It's a fantastic album. And if you're looking for something new to listen to, I gotta recommend Jessie Ware.
Wow. And that's interesting how she said that, like her music now seems to be more meaningful and a lot, she feels like it's better music now because her, like her bread and butter. That's interesting.
Well, she, the whole article talks about how when she came out with her first album, she was a sensation. She got nominated for the Mercury Prize, which is one of the biggest music prizes that you can win in the UK. Everyone basically applauded the album as a quote-unquote perfect album. It was a very, very sophisticated blend of R&B, dance music that's similar to a lot of artists like Disclosure or KDB, if you're familiar with those UK artists. And it's something that I feel anyone could kind of listen to and really enjoy, whether you're a dance music aficionado, if you really like adult contemporary. She's just got a voice that, the best description I've ever heard of it, I think it was for Pitchfork. They described it, it's like steel, but like velvet, in the sense that it is very strong, it's very controlled, it's very sturdy, but it is also very, very soothing on the ears. It's easy to listen to. And so to get back to the point that you were saying before, how it's interesting that her music is this way because she didn't make it her sole focus this time around. It's because this first album came out and it was such a sensation that her label and the industry that she was in kept trying to chase the highs of that first album. And subsequent releases just weren't as popular. People weren't coming to as many of her shows, and there was just a lot of pressure to really like have another hit for her and make her into like, for lack of a better term, just like a huge star for the label. And she said that once she started taking a step back from feeling like, okay, I have to please all of these people, I have to please my label, I have to please myself, I have to please the critics. And she just said, I'm just going to make the music that I want to make now. Not only did she have a more fun time making it, I mean, everyone who's listened to this album has pretty much universally lauded it. So it just goes to show, when you're making art, don't make it for other people, make it for yourself, make it the way you want to make it, and enjoy yourself when you make it, because chances are you will be better off striking gold that way than if you are worried about what everyone else is thinking and what your label is perhaps saying. So that's my music update. Listen to Jessie Ware. What's your pleasure?
It makes me want to go back to band camp. I didn't go to band camp. I went to choir camp, but it makes me want to go to band camp. I do want to talk about a couple things, and then we're going to close out the show. I can't believe it's already 8:43 Eastern Standard Time, Mick and Rajee. This show flew by a lot quicker than I anticipated. We were supposed to have another guest on, but they have some issues going on that are personal. And I'm sure once we see her, she will hopefully be in a better spot. I do want to talk about the numbers down here for COVID for Florida. Rajee and I both know how serious it is here, and I think it's probably the same out by you, Mick, as well. I didn't pull your information this time, but I will next time, and also for Ohio, because unfortunately the numbers just keep going higher and higher, not dissimilar to what I had been talking about for almost 3 months now. But basically, we have over 200,000 positive cases in Florida, and we are just shy of the top total for New York City. Their highest total was 11,541 at the beginning in March for one day. Down here, we are at 11,458. We've been climbing and climbing day to day for the last 2 weeks. And I don't want to hear anyone say it's because of the Black Lives Matter protests, and I don't want to hear anyone say because of people doing gay pride. I don't want to hear anyone come up with any stories about blaming things. It started, I personally believe, and I'm going to preface this with, Mick doesn't have to agree with me, and Rajee doesn't have to agree with me. This is my personal perspective. I think it started with reopening the economy here in Florida too early. I think that probably also happened in California. I think it happened already up in Ohio. I think it already happened in New York City as well. That's my personal perspective. But when you're talking about 12,000 new cases in one day, almost 12,000 cases in one day, that's absolutely ludicrous. And people, believe it or not, I'm not going to say who, but I bumped into someone at the gas station the other day who used to be on this show and is no longer on the show. And people who can watch it can see that person had no mask on. I had my face mask on, I had my goggles on, I had my face shield on, I had gloves on. And that individual is exactly in the horrible sweet spot of being an elder person, just running around, no face mask, going into and out of the business, which I was horrified to see that. But with 3,803 deaths in Florida and over 200,000 people that have COVID, put on your mask. Give me a break. I don't want to hear you're complaining. I don't want to know why you're sick of it, why you don't want to wear it. But I've been noticing it more and more down here, that people just run into and out of a place quickly. And I think it's very disrespectful. I saw actually, unfortunately today, what I refer to as the orange monster, and this is just my perspective, with all of his followers in front of the Washington Monument, packed elbow to elbow in a very small area that was open, and not one person had on a face mask. And that individual is making people who go to those events sign a waiver saying that that individual cannot be held responsible if they do contract COVID. So by the same token, they want to do tracing. I think the people that are in all these beautiful photos of support should be traced. You can't just trace the people that were at the Black Lives Matter events. You can't trace the people that are at the Gay Pride events. You can't go into other people's events and try to just trace them and not trace everybody. If contract tracing is going to be utilized, then it has to apply to everyone, not just the select few. That's just my personal perspective. So the COVID is not a good thing to end up things. I do want to mention to people here in Southern Florida about hurricane preparedness. There's eight items that are necessary. Rajee and myself and a lot of other people are very fortunate enough to be able to put these together. But I would suggest, Mick, maybe you could possibly do this also as well and give them to homeless people, just like we do. We give extra food and other items to people also as well. We buy backpacks and whatnot. There are programs out there already. You might be able to do it. So there's basic electronics. You basically pack a phone charger in your case. If you're fortunate enough to have electricity, then you can charge it. But if not, you can also just charge a battery pack. And also a long-lasting LED flashlight. See if it's possible to have or buy a hand-cranked or battery-operated AM/FM radio. That's the first basic item. Personal needs, typical stuff like laundry, toiletry items, travel size stuff. If you have eyeglasses, make certain to have kits and containers to keep them safe. You can also have baby wipes for multi-purpose tools or knives as a can opener. A lot of people don't know that you can actually flip the can upside down, the ridge that's on the high part. You can actually rub it back and forth on concrete, and within about a minute or less, you'll break the seal. Probably neither of you knew that. It looked like you're both kind of thinking, and if you think about it, all you do is you just flip the can where the top part goes to the bottom, and you rub it back and forth on concrete. And once you break that seal, you can actually open up a can. You don't have to have a can opener. Clothing, pack for a couple of days worth. Include layers to add or remove, plus light rain gear and waterproof boots. If you don't have waterproof boots, you can have plastic bags, you can have duct tape, those kind of things, or multiple layers of plastic bags. If you have medication, you should try to pack at least 3 days worth of your prescription drugs, or make certain that you have enough prescription drugs for at least 30 days. If you need larger items like an oxygen tank or whatnot, you can see if there are portable versions as well. And the idea is to think about small and portable. A backpack is the most ideal thing, but a light suitcase with wheels can also do very well as well. Paperwork, you can fill, or I should say, the Ziploc bags. Put your documents inside of a Ziploc bag. If you have originals, you can keep them at home. If you want to make photocopies, you can do that also as well. Social security card, driver's license, birth certificate, naturalization documents, proof of address or insurance, and medical immunization. By the way, Rajee, if you need an extra Pelican brief, I have one. So you can have a second case. I have 5 here for our documents that are waterproof. So I will be more than happy to give you one. Bottled water is essential, as well as granola or energy bars, because they are great and they're easy and small. They can fit into any package. Cash, for some of us, we can have access to cash. Small bills and actually rolls of quarters or nickels or dimes is actually easier. So then that way, if you do come across the place to be able to buy food from a vending machine, you can, and you don't have to, ask someone for change. So those are some tips for hurricane season, tornado season, COVID season. I just wanted to end my little point for the day with that, and then toss it over to my co-hosts to say what they want, and then it's time for us all to go to sleep.
Yeah, I need to get some view rest. So, one, I want to thank everyone for watching. This was I think it was a really compelling show, a lot of great information, and I hope you all enjoyed. And, stay safe, but at the same time, we're being safe, and we're, the mask and the gloves and all of that. But, you can still reach out to people and, thank God we have the technology. So, a nice text to someone to put a smile on their face would be nice. I mean, this week I heard from a few of my friends, and it was just nice to hear from people, even though we're not seeing each other per se. Just to hear from one another is a nice thing. But on that note, like I said, stay safe, have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week. And Mickey, what do you got to say?
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. I think I'm saying sort of the same things as everyone else. Wear a mask, don't go out and do things unless you have to leave your house, whether it's to go get a test or go get groceries. There's really no other reason you need to leave your home. I think it's also important to recognize that right now, things should not be open. Things like people should not be going out to gatherings. You shouldn't be going to restaurants. It's better that you stay at home. And I agree with Joseph as well that I think that the reason that there is a second wave is because we reopened things too early. But I also think that I think that there was no such thing ever as us reopening, quote unquote, after a certain right amount of time, because there's no vaccine, and we're like, it's not going to get better until there's a vaccine, or we at least know more about the virus than we know right now. And the thing is that after this many months, even if we were still in quarantine, or we were still enforcing quarantine really strictly, we still don't know very much about it. So even if you were thinking now, like, oh, maybe it's time to reopen again, that's not the time to reopen. The time is to stay at home, learn how to be by yourself a little bit. Don't isolate yourselves. Do what Rajee's saying, like check up on friends you haven't talked to in a while. This is a great time to make your FaceTime calls and make your Zoom calls. But also learn how to be on your own for a little bit. Pick up that hobby you've been putting off, whether it's crocheting or playing an instrument or learning a new language. This is the time to do it, because you're also not going to have this amount of time ever again, and then you're going to be complaining about having to be back out in the world again. So stay home, don't go anywhere, don't do anything. There's no vaccine, so don't open anything up. Joseph?
I just want to say, before we go to Joseph, I just want to say that, Mickey, you made me think, like, God, you're right. I think that's it. It's the vaccine, because, we opened up too quick, but, Joseph, I also do think it's a combination of, like, all the different things. Yes, the protesting. Yes, the getting together on the beaches and all of that, I think, play into the spike that we're seeing. And if you notice, and I completely forgot to say this when I was closing out, if you notice, more younger people are being affected, which means that those particular events that have happened, it must have spread a lot more. The good thing is, I heard today that they're saying that it's not as deadly as it was. It's not as deadly as it was, but it's spreading more. So, who knows if that's going to end up, not being true. It'll end up being deadly. Who knows? But I just wanted to comment on that. And look, girlfriend is in the house, honey.
She had.
I was feeling lonely. I wanted to
She had perfect timing at the very end, and actually Carlitta and I were discussing this earlier, and maybe this might be a good thing for her to close on quickly. And thank you so much for calling, Carlitta. I greatly appreciate it, and I hope everything's well. Mick and also Rajee brought up something that they seem similar with their thought process, and you and I discussed the exact same thing earlier this week. If there was a vaccine for COVID, would you take it? Let's go to Carlitta and see what she says first.
No way. I will not take it because as educated as I was in the past, we learned back in school that's how they took out a ton of the Indians. No way. I think over 85% of the Indian population was dissolved from that vaccine, correct?
I believe it is. I think it was exactly 85%.
Oh, scary.
So,
How are you guys?
No, we're good. And Mick is he's got a furrowed brow. He's looking up.
I'm just not familiar with that particular.
It was when the Americans first came here. It was I don't remember which plague it was, but basically it decimated the Indian.
Well, yeah, well that. Oh yes, like when they brought smallpox over here. Okay, I thought you were talking about a vaccine that they used on people.
No. We're not talking about that. But this is actually a really fun topic, to be honest with you, because it's not fun in a good way. But actually, the indigenous Indian people are more underrepresented than any of us on this call today, right now, with COVID. They're having more people get it and more people die than anybody else in the United States. And I suggest that people pull up that information to verify that. But Carlitta, we were just closing out the show. What do you have to tell us about what's going on in your beautiful life up there in Ohio?
So as of right now, we are told to wear a mask throughout downtown Cleveland, and it's extremely disturbing that I'd say 90% of the people are not wearing them still. So we're trying our hardest to let people know that they have to wear masks, and they're not doing so. So it's just, it's been a large amount of people that have been infected, but they are claiming that a lot of people are like, they're saying COVID on everything down here. Car accident, COVID. You fall down on a skateboard, like they're just labeling COVID on everything out here.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying in that regard, but and we discussed that earlier. We're going to need to look at some like data to substantiate that. But I agree with you if that's what you think. But obviously, COVID is getting worse and worse. But I understand what you're saying is that there might be a lot of misdiagnosis for COVID, correct?
Yes, and my daughter watched a TikTok, I believe, where they rub it on a watermelon and it comes back positive. Like people are like going a little overboard. They're going a little overboard with doing the COVID testing.
Okay, so then this is my question for, and Mick and Rajee and I are all a little confused with that. Mick, I don't know what you know about the COVID testing, but from what I understand, and Rajee, I'm going to ask you the same. The best COVID test that I heard about is where they shove those Q-tips up your nose and it feels like it's going into your brain and it sits there for like a couple of minutes. And then there's a lot of other tests. So, but that's like the most official test. And usually it's done in a hospital and that's the most accurate. So I understand that they're trying to figure out the way to do testing and whatnot. Mick, do you know anything about what I was just referring to, or Rajee? It looks like Mick has.
I went and got tested at Dodger Stadium, and they just do a mouth swab. So you swab it around your mouth for probably like 30 seconds. You have to get your gums, you have to get the back of your mouth, you get the roof of your mouth, your tongue, and it just, you take the swab, you break it off from one end and you put it in a little vial that has fluids in it. And I got my results literally the next day, and so did my roommate. So I've had very good results with it. The only thing is that it does take some time. You have to sit in line for a little while, but I learned basically that I don't thankfully have COVID. So what I've been doing so far has been good. And I'm not sure how my sister got tested, but like I said, she's up in Cleveland and she got tested recently and it came back positive for her. And I know one of my cousins has tested positive for it as well. So it is spreading around and I know that people are catching it. So yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know that I've heard anything about any false tests coming back. So I don't necessarily want to think about that either, because God forbid that's just something that has just been kind of thrown around on there and people start getting careless because they think that the numbers aren't that high, and then people start going out and then people start getting sick again. I mean, we've already seen people go out and get really sick from all of this just because the government was like, oh, everything's open again, everything's fine, even though everything is not fine. So yeah, I would say like it's more important to go out and get tested and make sure that you're okay, because I mean, places are also offering it for free. So if you can get it, get it. And I think 9 out of 10 tests that you get, probably even more than that, 99.9% of tests that you're getting are probably accurate, because the organizations that are doing it need that data as well. Like they need to know how sick people are. They should, and they should want to. And I mean, if it's not accurate, the worst thing that happened to you is you had to wait in line for a test, which.
Well, I agree with you. And actually, I don't even want to suggest it because then you're going to be concerned. And then I'll share a little personal story about my brother, I should say my partner's sister, who works at a nursing home here in Naples. So I think that none of the tests are accurate. I think that they're trying to figure out which one is the best test to do. So that's why some of it's a pinprick, some of it's they take blood, some of it's a swab in the mouth, some of it's up the nose. I think there's a lot of different tests, and until they figure out a way to do it better, all the data that we're getting might be flawed. But if half of the data is accurate that we are getting, we're seeing a gigantic increase. Now, to share a story about my partner's sister, she works at a nursing home in Naples. I will not call them out, even though I think they should be shut down. She gets tested once every 2 weeks. They originally had 35 residents and they are down to 5 in less than 2 weeks. And now they decided to reopen the facility and take in new residents. So that's horrifying and ridiculous and sad. And Rajee, I can see your disturbance in your eyes. That's a horrible story. And that's part of the reason why she was not present for the party, because she was concerned about her health. I think that nursing facilities should be, the people who work there should be tested every day, personally, because it's free. It should be done every day. If you're around people, if you're in a prison, you should be tested every day, the people that work there. If you're in a nursing home, you should be tested every day. You're talking about people that are stuck in a facility, whether on purpose, on their, because their family didn't want to take care of them, or they made a mistake, or they were wrongly, imprisoned. I'm talking about people that didn't deserve to be able to die because someone wanted to go out and, get a cheeseburger. I mean, seriously, I mean, it might have very well broken down to that. And actually, there's a new report. I don't have it all pulled up right now, but it said that WHO, the World Health Organization, is going to be readdressing their original assumptions, because now there are several scientists, I think 10 or 12 scientists across the world, who agree with what I said almost 2 months ago, and I mentioned it on the show with Carlitta on the other show, that I think that the COVID is aerosolized. It's already airborne. It's in the air. So that documentation will be starting to come out soon. And then when we bring in the Saharan dust storm that is actually going to be blanketing the entire United States between now and next week, it's already reaching California, by the way, Mick, according to the satellite imagery. Some of the Saharan dust is going all the way over to you, but we have a second wave of Saharan dust that is approximately 3 meters thick that is directly across the Atlantic right now. So down here for you and me, Rajee, we have about 2 or 3 days where it'll be okay to be outside, but soon you're going to have to wear a mask just to go outside just because of the Saharan dust. So it's those two things are coupled together, and actually it goes back to 1930 with the original Dust Bowl that happened, where they had a new name. It was called Dust Bowl pneumonia because people had so much dust in their lungs they could not breathe. There's some similarities between the Dust Bowl in 1930 and also what's happening now with COVID. And that's just my personal perspective. I implore you, Mick, and also you, Rajee, and also you, Carlitta, to at least look into that. And I'm done talking. But I'm happy that you called in, Carlitta. And it looks like hopefully you're not driving.
No, I'm not driving. Somebody is with me, but I was so upset that I couldn't get on the phone. My uncle had popped in, and unexpectedly we were supposed to all be on the phone, and so I did something with all of her. So, but I'm gonna look into this. It's just scary what's going on in our world right now. You know what I mean? But it's good that we're open to a lot of like things that are happening and everything. So it's very eye-opening. You have to keep your eyes open at all times. You never know. One day everything could change.
Exactly. I totally agree. It's a scary time. I think it's 1918, meet 1930, we meet 1964. All of this is happening, and then here in our country, we have on top of that a presidential election coming up. So there's a lot going on. And, in regard to like the testing and stuff, really, let's think about it. In the history of our existence, when something new comes around, it's trial and error. It really is. People don't know. You're trying different things until you get a handle on it. It happened with everything. It happened with polio. It happened with the Spanish flu. Everything is trial and error because we don't know exactly what this virus. We don't know everything about this virus. And recently, I don't know if you all heard, but in China, they said now there's another strand of the virus that's mutated, and it's now a new strand of the virus. But I don't think they said it seems to be not as deadly, but it's very contagious. They actually said this new strand is supposedly more contagious than the one that we're dealing with, COVID-19.
I heard it's mutating. I heard that this is the most dangerous one in China right now. The second round it's really, really, really bad.
Originally, they said that there were 12 different versions. Originally, when this COVID came out, they said there were 12 different versions of the COVID. And it was regionalized. Like there was an American COVID, there was an Asian COVID, there was an African COVID, there was a European COVID. There were 12 different versions of it. And like I mentioned before, long time ago, it's going to look for the least path of resistance, just like water. Or air trying to escape. It doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are. I saw it on the news just the other day. There was a kid that was just born and he had COVID. And then I saw some 80-year-old guy who survived COVID that got a $1.1 million bill just today because he was in the hospital for $1.1 million. And they said, hopefully his insurance will pay for it. Mick, what do you got to say about that?
I've heard that everybody is getting huge bills. Huge, like huge. It's ginormous. And they actually cannot even do all the treatment. But as soon as they can label it, I wish that there were more honest people and it wasn't so. To me, I feel like it's a money scam. I do now. I feel like it's a scam just to get us this vaccine.
What do you think? What do you think the purpose of the vaccine is? Because you and I discussed this, and Rajee, please chime in. But
Well, no.
go ahead, Rajee.
I was just going to say with the vaccine, I take a flu shot every year. I take the flu vaccine every year, and it's been fine for me. So I don't know when one comes out. I may take my chances and take it. I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to feel my way and see and kind of like hear what's happening with people that have taken it. But I just everyone is different, and it's a personal decision you have to make. So based on my taking the vaccine for the flu every year and not having really any problems, I may end up taking the COVID vaccine. You were saying something, Mickey?
I was just going to say, we are 12 minutes overdue, like a big baby that was supposed to be born 12 months ago, or 12 minutes ago. Mickey, we're going to start with you, and we're going to round out with these big, buxom, beautiful babes that we have to say goodbye.
Hi, everyone. Have a great week. Glad we were able to talk with you. Glad Carlitta was able to make it on, and we will talk to you next week. Wear a mask and don't go outside. Thanks.
So I guess, okay, so I'll just say bye. Take care. Have a great week, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this show, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you for watching the show, and hopefully we come up with some more new information for next week for all of you to enjoy and indulge with us. And I pray that this doesn't get worse, but I kind of feel like it's gonna. Just stay safe and try not to go out to the restaurants as much, and just try to stay in a little bit more, and please wear your mask everywhere you guys go.
Absolutely, Carlitta and Mick and Rajee, I agree with all of you. And just to give all of you a little tease, and it's a tease for another reason as well, I was thinking that it might be a good idea to talk about the stock market and housing markets, how people are able to sell or buy during what's going on, because there's a new way of doing house sales. There's virtual house sales where you actually don't have to see somebody. And believe it or not, during all this time going up and down, you can actually make money in the stock market. We might be lucky to have someone give us a tip. I don't know. I'm going to try to work on that, but that's a little bit of an idea. And obviously COVID's going to be all over our next episode, as well as Trans Lives Matters, as well as Music Matters, as well as the Midwest Carlitta's Corner, and also Psychic Sabrina will probably be on the next episode or the one after that. And we might have a musical interlude from somebody as well. I want to thank all of our viewers. Like, subscribe, and share. You can get a hold of Mick directly at mick@mysouthernexposure.site. Peace. And you can get a hold of Rajee at mysouthernexposure.site. And you can get a hold of me, Joseph, at mysouthernexposure.site. And if you are a business that is operating safely or trying to operate safely, you can contact us at advertise@mysouthernexposure.site. We have great rates, and we have people from all around the United States who can definitely help you to promote and hopefully help you get some more business. But I just got a text message. Mickey has something to say. Mickey.
One last thing, just really, really quick. It's with regards to a lot of the protests, the Black Lives Matter protests that we've been seeing recently and everything that's going on. One thing that I do want to point out to people, and this is evidence that has been put forward by many, many people. If you're going to protest, obviously wear a mask, but know that people have found that the rate of transmission of COVID at many of these protests is very low. I have gone to a number of protests, and I have thankfully not contracted anything. Good friends of mine have also gone to them. And if anything, I've noticed, I went to one earlier this week, and there are just significantly less people there. It's a time for us all to be out and supporting the people, specifically supporting Black people at this time as we push for a reimagining of our police forces and what it means to be safe in this country. If you can go to a protest, please go. Please be safe, obviously, and go within reason. But if you're worried about catching COVID, one thing that you can be pretty assured of is that if you are being safe at a protest and you're wearing a mask and you're not standing too close to people, you will be okay. So this is my reminder to do your civic duty.
No, that's
back to you, Joseph.
That's fabulous, Mick. And also, just as a side note, I talked with Rajee about this earlier. My partner and I decided to do our own little civic duty. We started a balloon drop where we tie messages to balloons, helium balloons, and let them up. Not millions of them, but we put a little message on the balloon: Black Lives Matter, Trans Lives Matter, COVID, wear a mask, those kind of things. So it's something that we will probably continue to do indefinitely. And I believe people in the neighborhood might start seeing some of those balloons with helpful messages that say something along the lines of, God loves you, you're special, you are needed, you are loved, and spread love, all of those kinds of things. So keep your eyes open. You might start to see some balloons, and hopefully the right message will land on you right when you need it. And some of those are probably from us in the neighborhood. And I believe it might start catching on in other areas as well, to try to help spread the message while we cannot necessarily be around each other. I know there's a little bit of, what is it called? Pollution by balloons falling somewhere, but the messages that are attached to them are made out of love and to try to help and promote people and help them look at a positive thing and also acknowledge the things that are negative currently right now. So I guess I let the cat out of the bag. I wasn't planning on doing it, but you brought up the be your civic duty. So I had to let you know what we just did earlier today. All right, hopefully none of those balloons I'll get sued for, but it's, who knows, but I really don't care. Anyways, thank you so much for watching our episode today, episode number 7, Lucky 7. So we will see you next week on Sunday between 7 to 9 with all these fabulous faces. So thank you so much. The weather held out and the show went on without any technical problems. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Carlitta.